Remember last week on Seahawks Today when we were challenged by the 49ers report to get 1,000 likes on a video? Well, we came so close, but yet just a little bit short. 975 likes. So my guy, Chase Sr., said, how about this time? Can you guys actually do it? Because I don't think you can. And I said, give us a second chance, and we will make it happen. Like today's video. Let's get to 1,000 likes and prove why the 12s are the best fans in the National Football League. The trade deadline is near, and on this edition of Seahawks Today, we will examine 5 big-name trade targets that the Seattle Seahawks could be trading for when the trade deadline rolls around. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our first name on the list, a guy that we haven't talked about on this program previously, but I would love to see him in a Seahawks uniform. Maxx Crosby of the Las Vegas Raiders. Crosby, I got to tell you, when you turn on the film and then you look at the resume too, you see a generational talent in Maxx Crosby and the type of player that I think could close the gap with the 49ers. What have we talked about a lot on this program the last few days? It's that this Seahawks team is very good, but you have to start thinking, what can we do to be on that level of San Francisco and Philadelphia? Those teams have been aggressive at making moves in the last couple of years to better their roster and take those next steps. Although the Seahawks are very good, what could they do to close that gap? Maxx Crosby is a guy that can help close said gap. You look at Crosby, this is a guy that was a second-team All-Pro back in 2021, two-time Pro Bowler as recently as last year. And also last season, he led the league in tackles for loss with 22 last season. Was outstanding in the performance that he put together. And his track record, this is a guy that is just really starting to come into his own. The best, I think, is still yet to come with Maxx Crosby. So far through 2023, he's on pace to have the best season of his career with 5 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. Last year, he had 12.5 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. And you may be wondering, why would the Raiders want to get rid of a guy like this? Well, they did just win the other night, but I don't think the Raiders are going anywhere. There's still a decent chance the Raiders would be looking to sell when the trade deadline comes around here in a couple of weeks. So what does Maxx Crosby cost you? It's not cheap. I can tell you that much. You got to take out his contract, which is a lot of money. But you can probably get this done if you give up a first, a third, and a fifth, get a sixth in return as well, and Maxx Crosby potentially makes his way to Seattle. What do you think about the idea of Maxx Crosby? Weigh in the comment section on our pinned comment. Tell us what you think. Why for yes, in for no, if the Seahawks should trade for Maxx Crosby or not. Next on the list, DeForest Buckner, the defensive tackle from the Indianapolis Colts. Better than I think people would expected out of this team in 2023, but eventually you would think they're going to fall apart, right? And as far as this position goes, I know Jarran Reed has stepped up and done a really good job filling that void, but we've already seen him get hurt. The shin injury he suffered last week, and so that leaves some questions about the depth of that group going forward. And one idea that I think you could look at, if you bring in DeForest Buckner, you could move Reed back to his natural position of defensive end. Mario Edwards then is a rotational piece, and all of a sudden you have depth. You lost Mike Morris for the season. You need more depth. This could kill 2 birds with 1 stone, essentially, if you bring DeForest Buckner in. DeForest Buckner, a first-team All-Pro in 2020, second-team All-Pro in 2019, was a Pro Bowler as recently as 2021. And you talk about stability and finding ways to work through injuries. He returned this season from a UCL tear in his left elbow, overcame that to still end up playing at a high level this season. So far, through the first 5 games, we've seen DeForest Buckner already pick up 2 sacks. He's got a forced fumble. Last year had 8 sacks total with 2 forced fumbles as well. So DeForest Buckner, even with the position that he plays, being on the interior, he's putting up numbers that are comparable to what we talk about with those outside pass rushers. So DeForest Buckner, I like. And when we look at the potential trade, remember, the Colts a couple of years ago, when they traded for him from San Francisco, they had to give up an arm and a leg. Well, now that Buckner is a little bit older in his career now, I don't think that's going to cost as much as that trade a couple of years ago. I think you could probably pull off a trade for Buckner for about a fourth-round pick, which would be huge for this Seattle Seahawks team and would help this team a long ways if you could pull that off and add him to your roster right now. More trade ideas to get to in a moment, but first, today's show is sponsored by Gametime. Gametime, I got to tell you, I'm so excited that we have Gametime on board here at Chat Sports because, let's put it simply, Gametime is the best place to go when it comes to tickets for sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, and more, and the lowest prices are guaranteed with Gametime. Here's how it works. You pull up the event you want to go to. It's got all the prices listed, and then you pick out your seat, and you can see what your seat is going to look like. You can zoom in, get the view if you like it or not. Maybe you want to pick out a different seat. You get those options to see what it's going to be like when you're in the stadium when you're there. And it's so easy that within a matter of moments, you could be paying for your tickets with Apple Pay. And if you decide at the last minute that you want to go to one of these games or events, Gametime is so fast and so easy to get you those tickets in just a matter of seconds. And here's what we're offering viewers of Seahawks Today. If you download Gametime now, you can get $20 off with the promo code SeahawksChat. Create an account. Terms and conditions do apply. Download Gametime now and start saving some money and go to these great sporting events. I got to tell you, Gametime was a big help for me when I went and saw my Kansas Jayhawks play University of Texas a couple weeks ago. That can be you too with Gametime. $20 off, promo code SeahawksChat. Link is in the comments and the description of today's video. Next on the list is Danielle Hunter. That's a name that we have talked about a decent amount on this channel over the last couple of months. And now with the way things have gone for the Minnesota Vikings so far in 2023, of not even coming close to the expectations that they had for this season to compete in their division, it would appear that the Vikings are very likely to be sellers when the trade deadline comes around. And I know it feels like that Danielle Hunter's been in the league for a while of sorts, but think about this. He's still only 28 years old. And based on the numbers that he's put up, which we'll show you here in just a second, he's playing as good as ever right now. You could argue that he's really just now in the thick of the prime of his career at the moment. Hunter, a second-team All-Pro back in 2018, was a Pro Bowler that season as well as 2019 and most recently as last year. And you talk about production in the here and the now. In the present, he's currently tied for second in the league in sacks with 6 so far through the first 5 games this season. Also has a forced fumble, 9 tackles for loss as well. Danielle Hunter is off to a really good start to this season. And you talk about resiliency when you mentioned Danielle Hunter. Think about back in 2020. Had that neck injury. And while most people would not have been able to recover and get back to playing football at full speed again, not only did Danielle Hunter recover from that neck injury, but he came back to be a Pro Bowl caliber player. Pretty remarkable for Danielle Hunter, to say the least. So what would it cost for Danielle Hunter? I think you're looking at a trade that would include probably about a second and a fifth-round pick, and then you get another edge rusher. And what we saw, remember, just a couple weeks ago against the Giants when he had 11 sacks, and that was out of nowhere, right? The Seahawks pass rush didn't play that great leading up to that point. Now that starts to become more of the norm. Not necessarily 11 sacks every game, but that pass rush starts to come alive more and more as far as that goes. More players to get to in a moment, but first, name a player the Seahawks should trade for. I've given you a few names. Now your chance to weigh in. Get in that comment section. Tell me who that is that you'd like to see in Seattle. Another name we talked about on the channel this week, Brian Burns, edge rusher from the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers are in an interesting position right now. They're 0-5 on the season, and they're looking for draft capital to build around Bryce Young. And you may recall last year, the Panthers had several trade offers for Brian Burns. Ultimately, they decided to keep him, but now you've had changes in management and in coaching since that happened last year. And when I look at Brian Burns, this is what I see in Brian Burns. The difference that he brings to the table is fear, putting his opponents on notice every single week. That's what you look at when you see Brian Burns take the football field, is that fear factor. Shout out Joe Rogan for what he brings to the table there. To me, that's intimidating. That's what Brian Burns does, folks. Two-time Pro Bowler. Right now, still a very young guy. He's been in the league 5 years, and the versatility, not just the fear factor, but the versatility. He's played both defensive end and outside linebacker, both at a high level in different schemes in his 5-year career so far. Coming off a year where he had career highs in sacks and tackles for loss. I mean, it was great last year. 12.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble, 17 tackles for loss, and 63 tackles. So far this year, 4 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 5 tackles for loss. He was a problem when the Seahawks faced him just a couple of weeks ago and got that win. The trade value, I don't think his trade value is as much as it was a season ago, because last year, if you were to trade for him, you were going to get another year of the rookie contract. In this case, the rookie contract and all that is gone. And so I'm looking at about a first and a fourth-round pick. It's not cheap, but it is still a little bit cheaper than it was last year when the Panthers allegedly turned down 2 first-round picks for Brian Burns last year. Folks, you got to stay subscribed to Seahawks Today by Chat Sports. You ain't live if you ain't subscribed. We're talking about your Seattle Seahawks each and every day with daily news and rumors. I mean, hell, we did 2 videos today, for crying out loud. And there might be more of that in the future. We're going to be live coming up this weekend for our Seahawks-Bengals watch party coming up this weekend. We'll begin our coverage about 9:30 in the morning Pacific time. Don't miss it. Subscribe now. Join us for our watch party this weekend. Me and Smitty, we're going to have a hell of a time. We'll see you then. Last on our trade targets list, Chase Young, another guy that has been talked about a lot over the last several months, not just with the Seahawks, but other teams across the National Football League. And with Chase Young, it's very interesting. Between the injuries and the way the Commanders have used him, or lack thereof, I feel like that he hasn't come to his full potential of what he could be. Remember, Chase Young was somebody that was the number 2 overall pick back in 2020 and was viewed as the best player in college football coming out. A dominant force. Young, wild, and free. Chase Young, right? And that first year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Pro Bowler, I mean, he was all that in a bag of chips. You've had some injuries along the way, and this year, small sample size, but we're starting to already see Chase Young come back into the player that he was thought of a couple of years ago. He's got 3 sacks already this year, 3 tackles for loss, 11 sacks. He's got more sacks in the first 4 games of this year than he did the last 2 years combined. Chase Young is starting to figure it out, and now's the time to get him. Well, the price tag's a little bit cheaper before he starts to continue to show that he is that player that was the number 2 overall pick. Probably get him for a second-round pick. Seems unlikely the Commanders are going to be able to re-sign him with the money that they've paid for other positions. I really like that idea potentially for a move for Chase Young there. What are the chances the Seahawks make a trade at the trade deadline? If you recall, the Seahawks have not actually made a trade since they traded for J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. If you don't remember him, it's okay. That was back in August of last year. So it's been a while. What do you think? Scale it for me 1 through 10. What do you think the odds are of the Seahawks making a trade here? So to recap, our trade targets for the Seahawks at the deadline: Maxx Crosby, DeForest Buckner, Danielle Hunter, Brian Burns, and Chase Young. You may notice one common theme: defense and pass rushers. We'll see what the Seahawks do. Thanks for joining us here on the channel today. Don't forget to hit the like button, and let's see if we can get 1,000 likes and prove those 49ers fans wrong, and we'll see you next time right here on Seahawks.